you. So we have 2 minutes to go. In 2 minutes' time, we'll be going officially into the second session of the event. And in fact, I mean, to be honest, what the heck? Let's start now. So we're live streaming on YouTube as well. So to the millions out there watching on YouTube, hello and welcome to see you. This is session 2 of the Connected Cities event, which is focusing on how we recover from COVID and how we can actually take advantage of what's happening recovering from COVID. And what we see is an opportunity as well as a threat. And I think that's probably the focus of all of the presentations that are going to be happening today. We'll begin, if that's okay with you, Mike, with a presentation. Oh, yes, sorry, good point. Today's agenda. This session goes on until 1 o'clock. There'll be an hour's break for lunch. Then from 2 until 3:30, we'll be talking about the planning issues in relation to all of this. There'll be another break after that for whatever kind of beverage is required, mid-afternoon on a sunny day. And then at 4:30, we'll come back together for the last session, which is how to deliver all the things we've been talking about throughout the day. And then right at the very end, we will have our virtual bar for anybody who wants to have a chat. So right now, we're talking about Mike Smith from Network Rail, then Deborah Fox, who is from Transport for West Midlands, and Andreas Markadis, who I suspect many people know, who will be talking about transport hubs. And in between, there'll be a couple of mini presentations about the Connected Cities take on this, but we'll just weave them in. I'll probably speak after Mike, and Camilla will probably speak after Andreas. So I think we've now hit the crucial moment of 11:30. So at this point, I would ask you to, yes, thank you, mute yourself if possible, apart from obviously Mike, who will begin speaking. So over to you, please, Mike.
Hello. Sorry, Brian. Hi, Brian. Hi, everybody. Is the presentation is someone going to sort of share the presentation the 3 or 4 slides I sent across? Or do you want me to do that?
John, what's?
Mike, it would be best if you did. I'm afraid we don't have them to hand, I'm afraid.
Oh, sorry.
So if you've got them, please show them yourself if you're familiar with that. If not, I can talk you through it briefly. But
no, I can do that. Just bear with me a minute.
No, don't worry.
Misunderstood.
And if you can, go into slideshow on PowerPoint before you try and screen share on Zoom. It's not always possible.
Okay, and I'm just going to try and screen share now for you.
Yeah.
Okay, has everyone got that?
That's great. Thank you.
Great.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. So apologies for that. Slight. Is that what you call a technical hitch? I'm Mike Smith. I'm the Strategy and Planning Director for Network Rail, covering London and the South as a geography. But I work as part of the Network Rail System Operator team, looking at the long-term strategy across the network. So thank you for giving me opportunity to speak to you all today. And yeah, we live in really challenging times. I won't kind of over repeat what's already been said. The pandemic's putting enormous pressure on everybody, and I think the railway has managed to respond respond well. I think the importance of carrying freight and passengers around, and particularly, as part of keeping the country moving, has never been more important, never been demonstrated quite as starkly as it has been in the last few months. But there's no doubt that we're continuing to deliver almost 90% of the services that we would normally deliver, and we're doing that with considerable support from government. And I think it's, this is what I want to talk about today, really, is about the future. But I think it's impossible to talk about the future without some reference to the difficulties we've got in front of us. But fundamentally, I want to start by just talking about what I think will be really important to passengers and to our freight users going forward. So I'll go from a multi-image slide there, if you see, to a picture there, which is taken from our operating centre at Three Bridges. And the reason I've put that slide up is because going forward, I think the absolutely fundamental truth is that passengers already expected a punctual railway. And if we're going to get passengers back onto public transport in general and the railway specifically, that punctuality has to be taken to a whole new level. And the technology we're now deploying in the railway is absolutely at the heart of that. We'll have improved diagnostic tools so we can understand where assets may be deteriorating in their performance, and we can fix them before they fail. And through our digital railway programme, which is looking to roll out in-cab signalling, we'll hopefully, during the next few years, remove more and more of the equipment from trackside, control the trains using the most modern European technology, and again, reduce the number of assets that can fail. Added to that, the management systems that are integrated within that technology mean that we'll be in a far better position. If externalities happen, if delays happen that aren't really about the assets, be that, they're not about the train asset or the track asset, they could be about other things that happen that disrupt the timetable. The traffic management systems that we're now going to deploy in the future will be able to get the service back and running faster than it's ever been before, and back to that high level of punctuality. And looking at the way we then develop the network using that type of technology, it means that we'll be able to model the network better, we'll be able to model changes to the network, and we'll be able to be more ambitious about how we use capacity. Because with a highly punctual railway backed by technology, the truth of the matter is you need less of a buffer to cover performance. You can expect high levels of reliability. Now that will help bring passengers back. But moving to the next slide, I wanted to focus on the shop window in many ways. And the shop window to me is a hugely diverse and versatile shop window. But fundamentally, what we want is to be able to sell tickets in a way that is useful to the people buying them. Now that might mean that we will obviously continue to have face-to-face sales with our passengers at stations, but we also need to provide an ever diverse public out there with different ways to buy tickets. The example I've used there is one of the smart card systems that's been introduced by Southeastern. These have been introduced across the network by different train operators. And added to that, we need really user-friendly journey planning tools. If you're in different parts of the country, you will find that the shop window is either really clear or quite opaque. And what I mean by that is that if you're planning a journey, in some parts of the country, you can go to a journey planning tool on the internet and you can find out how a really integrated journey would work between different modes. In other parts of the country, that information just isn't available. And if we're fighting for passengers, the easiest thing for someone planning a journey in some senses is to pick up their car keys, get in the car, and then get to the other end of the destination. They don't really need to overplan that. but it has consequences, and I'll come back to that later. What we need to do is to provide really good end-to-end journey planning tools through the technology that is out there. And some of what's happened during the COVID crisis has demonstrated we can probably do a lot more with technology and be more comfortable and confident in using it than perhaps we were before. There is no doubt before COVID, working patterns were changing. What we began to refer to do as the 3-day commute was becoming a reality. And that produces several challenges for us, but real opportunities too. We have the opportunity to think about how we use capacity to perhaps provide different types of services, less emphasis on some of the traditional 5-day-a-week commuting services. And I'll come back to that in a moment when I touch on restoring your railways, but also to be able to think about a different type of season ticket, if you like, a different type of offer out there, and use technology to bring a product in terms of what people want to buy as a rail journey that's far more innovative and has got far more flexibility to reflect a kind of flexible working and leisure world out there for us. I'm going to move to the next slide because I'd like to sort of introduce a really important part of creating a different railway. That's the Restoring Your Railways programme. Now, this is a key government objective. It's part of the government's levelling up agenda. And it's also, I say, even more important in the post-COVID world. We want to reconnect the railway to many communities that, for reasons of history, have become less connected, or where communities have grown, that whilst this is often referred to as beach and reversals, in many senses, communities and towns and cities have grown significantly since the 1960s when the Beeching report was produced. So the railway is going to need to meet different needs. And the programme that has been launched during this year, even though the crisis has been upon us, we've driven forward with the Restoring Your Railways programme. Over 100 proposals have been submitted to government. 20 have been approved for development so far. There is likely to be some more approved in the autumn. Each of these is about reconnecting the railway to different communities. And I guess I might get some questions on that later, so I won't go into too much of that. But you'll be also assured that we're working harder than we've ever worked before to link in with other providers of strategic infrastructure. So we've got a very close working relationship with Highways England now, and that means that the investment that is put in, which is taxpayers' investment, is aimed at providing the right transport solutions and efficient transport solutions at that. I'm going to move to the last image. And the reason I've put this image up, that is actually a series of solar panels which are next to the railway in Aldershot. And we're using the solar panels to contribute to the power requirements to run the signalling and other operational needs of that section of line. Obviously, solar power isn't the answer to everything. It isn't anywhere near strong enough to provide the traction supply. But the railway is continuing to look at different ways of making its offer greener. And that leads me to the last kind of point I wanted to make, was that part of what the railway is about in the future, I believe, is remembering that we have a unique selling point. But our unique selling point is different to different passengers, to different parts of the population. Leisure travel and working patterns are changing. We therefore need to help people work and enjoy the train journey. The on-train facilities need to continue to develop such that people do find that if I'm on the train, traveling to a place of business, back from a place of business, or even in the midst of operating a call as being a virtual meeting, on the train. I've got the right facilities to be able to do that for my business travel. It's a lot easier to do that on a train with the right facilities than it is if you take that journey with the car keys. That's when I talked about consequences. You can't do that when you're driving a car. You can do that when you're being driven on a train. The train has a huge impact on people's leisure lives, as you call it. The leisure experience post-COVID needs to be an experience of enjoyment, and the train needs the right facilities to do that. Be that internet facilities such that people can stream and have read and listen to music, or even just the social chatting experience. And therefore, the layout of the train is to think about that in the future, and distancing is part of that. The railway is greener. Emissions, transport emissions, over 80% of them are still from private cars, and there isn't a green HGV out there. So the more we can provide people with an offer of a green journey, the more likely that people will choose rail for that reason. For parts of our population, parts of our whether a journey is green, you only have to look at the way that products are displayed in the supermarket. The emphasis on the origin and on the credentials of that journey are the same as the credentials of what's on the shelves in the supermarket. People buy things because they feel those things are produced for the right reasons and are, if you like, greener. And in the end, rail is safer. We've had a tragic accident up in Stonehaven recently. I can touch on that if anyone wants to ask any questions. But it is the case for rail being safer is compelling. Just look at the number of accidents that happen on the road, day in, day out. Look at the unfortunate amount of deaths that happen on the road. The railway has grown its passenger base so significantly for all of these reasons, for all of the reasons. And we need to continue to focus on those reasons across different parts of the network, to different parts of the population, and to provide them with the service that they will demand going forward, which will be affected and will feel slightly different, like all parts of life, I think will feel slightly different. But some of the core selling points of the railway are still there. I think it's a really positive future. I think if you combine focusing on our selling points, you combine our focus on connecting our communities, and you can combine our use of technology in the right way to help people to improve their journey, and you combine our effort in order to bring different parts of the transport picture together, I think we've got a massive opportunity out there. I'm really excited about it. And it's nice to be excited about something in the context of the lives that we're living at the moment. So I'm going to close it there. I don't know how much of my time I've got left, but I hope that has made some sense, one, and I hope you've got a sense as well of the level of enthusiasm, which whilst I like to think I'm a fairly enthusiastic type, I think I'm typical of the colleagues I work with, and we all want to make the railway something really, really good for the next 200 years, and to have the contribution that the railways had actually in the last 200 years to the country and what have you. Enough of the flag waving there. I'll leave it.
Right, thank you very much, Mike. Much appreciated, and excellent timing. Very good. I'm sure you're going to have a very busy and fascinating breakout room later on, no doubt about it. Right, we will now give a short presentation here of part of the Connected Cities vision, which has really risen, it's got focused as a result of the activities of the last 6 months, because it strikes us that potentially things could actually get a lot better, and hence this phrase Pullman public transport. Now, social distancing is here, whether we like it or not. Trains, public transport, everything is going to have to accommodate it. And the other thing that's happened is that teleworking has become widespread. Everybody uses it. Even older people use it, and I think if they don't have it at present, it's perfectly reasonable that the government should provide it for older people in much the same way that they provide other services for older people. Because in whatever form it takes, mobility as a service is going to become the norm, I think, in the future. Everybody's talking about it. People are beginning to deliver it. There's been fantastic work done in Northampton in the last 2 or 3 years to pilot it, and many other places. But all journeys are going to be booked online, and it will be something that we take for granted, like we take Google for granted. And I think payment will be made online as well. And the system will emerge, which is going to be very similar to the system that budget airlines use, which is the sooner you book, the cheaper you're likely to get it. And if you want to travel at a busy time, it will cost you more. And if you want to travel at a less busy time, it will cost you less, because what's going to happen is this will automatically achieve the kind of distancing we need. I think we're going to be faced with a situation where you can't get onto public transport unless you've booked a place. So looking at a possible journey under this scenario, we'll say it begins with bus, it then goes on to a train journey, and it probably ends as a cycle journey. So you're told exactly when your bus is arriving, and you're told where your seat is and what wonder it is. And when you get onto it, it's designed with social distancing in mind. And it does have all the facilities that Mike had just been talking about. These already are on buses in places like Brighton and several other locations. So there's nothing new about any of this. When you actually arrive at the station, you won't be left standing on a cold and freezing platform. You'll be in a convenient and pleasant environment. And that will be part of what you've booked as part of the package. Because potentially, telecentres as places for co-working are well located at hubs, particularly stations. And because I don't think, as Peter Hendy said 2.5 hours ago, many people will want to work from home all the time. There'll always be a significant number of people who will actually seek the company of others, but they won't want to travel all the way into a big city in order to do it. And they may not have the space at home. So I think that the telecentre as the place of work will become quite common. And the model for this, of course, is the first class waiting lounge, with which we're all familiar. When you're in your first class waiting room, you will be told when your train is coming. And what's more, once again, you'll be told where your seat is and what it is. And you'll also be directed to the least busy way of getting onto the train. This kind of technology already exists at Utrecht Station. It can be rolled out everywhere if we have the determination to do it. Once you're onto your train, well, you're going to be faced with something that's much more like what we currently call first class, where there are social distancing as the norm and comfortable seating results. And as a consequence, the whole experience of passenger travel will change. It will become, public transport will become a pleasant and enjoyable experience, we believe. And regarding the point that Mike just made for connectivity whilst traveling, well, it even exists on the underground. I was on an underground train and somebody was using his mobile phone and saying to the person the other end, look, I'll be there in 6 or 7 minutes. And they obviously were saying, how can you possibly be doing that because you're on a mobile phone? And he said, no, I'm here. I'm actually on the Jubilee line and I'm 6 or 7 minutes away from you, believe me. So I will stop share at that point because it's very much part of the vision, but it's something that's integrated into everything else. Our next speaker is Deborah Fox. She has been working for a considerable amount of time to do something that's suddenly come right to the fore of everything with regards to traffic demand management and travel demand management in the West Midlands. So at this point, I will simply pass over directly to you, if I may, please, Deborah.
Thank you so much, Brian. And I believe I was invited to give this talk on the back of an article that appeared in Transport Times last week, written by Laura Schoaf, our Managing Director at Transport for West Midlands. And I might refer to Transport for West Midlands later on as TFWM, if you'll forgive me. And we are the transport arm of the West Midlands Combined Authority. That might pop up sometimes as WMCA. So I'm really pleased to be here today. And I've been looking at the Connected Cities agenda and really learning and starting to understand what it is that you're aiming for. And I find that very inspiring. So what I'm going to do is ask you to really start thinking as a customer of transport and travel. Think about your own journeys and how you might travel intermodally, not necessarily only using rail or bus or tram or walking and cycling, but perhaps using a multitude of those modes in your daily life, because that's increasingly what we're finding. And so travel demand management is one way to help manage that situation for people and the large numbers of people out on our networks at any one time. So I'm pressing a forward button, but nothing's happening.
You have to scroll down, I discovered.
Ah, right, let's go for it. Okay, that's fantastic. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of strategic context around the West Midlands. Our economic plan vision is really that we make our mark so the West Midlands is the best region in the UK to do business. And our population is actually forecast to grow by 444,000 in 2035. So we've got a challenge really to accommodate all those new people who may be choosing to travel on our networks. And in the order of 200,000 new homes will be built by 2030, and that's in the wider West Midlands Combined Authority area. And rail growth is strong, with 64% in the past 10 years. But overcrowding is still common, or certainly was pre-COVID. And I can tell you that now in the West Midlands, our public transport is up to near 100% capacity, with perhaps a little bit running a little bit behind on our rail capacity. So looking at an infographic here on what those challenges mean to us in travel and transport. And as you can see there, we are a growing region. And so between now and 2035, our region will grow every day by around 100 people. And that's the equivalent of filling 1.5 buses or 84 cars. And so you can really see the challenges that starts to present us. And around 50% of our road traffic is carried on the key route network, around 23 key routes across the West Midlands. And that's only 7% of the road network available to us. An average weekday peak speeds of 17.7 miles per hour being reported pre-COVID. And I think it's already been mentioned in the conversation leading up to this event that certainly the traffic peaks have levelled out across the country. However, the traffic levels have returned in the West Midlands to near pre-COVID levels. So how are we dealing with this? Well, in 2018, we wrote the congestion management plan, and this is available quite easily if you Google congestion management plan or West Midlands network congestion management. And the area that I'm going to focus on is managing demand, although that comes with two other pillars, clearly. A 10-year delivery plan to increase capacity on our transport networks and also improving efficiency. So that includes key route network management and what I'll come on to tell you a little bit about, which is the Regional Transport Coordination Centre. There's also a lot of focus going into improving efficiency on rail services. There's a bus action plan and also a focus on safety and security on our public transport and on our networks. So it looks today as if we're all using pictures of Grant Shapps, and here he is opening the Regional Transport Coordination Centre earlier this year. And this has been a major step forward for us in the West Midlands, actually getting towards a real-time view of the network. And I mean all the network, including rail, bus, other public transport modes, as well as the roads. And we're looking here at a single view of the programme. This is really important to us in the West Midlands because a huge investment programme is underway, some of which I mentioned in my first slide. And here we see some of the impacts we expect to see between now and 2022, when we'll be holding the 2022 Birmingham Commonwealth Games. And these are interventions where we'll be building new transport infrastructure, where new homes are going in, where there'll be new rail stations. So as you can see, there's going to be quite a lot of disruption right across the network. And so whether people are travelling intermodally by choice or maybe by necessity due to roadwork or other interventions, it'll be really interesting to see how we can support those companies. Here's an example, a snapshot of a single view of the network that's coming out of the Regional Transport Coordination Centre. And as you can see, this is a delightful day. Unfortunately, there are some bus disruptions happening, but very few disruptions happening elsewhere on the network, none on the rail. So isn't that marvellous? But however, you know, we know that this is perhaps a very positive day on the network. For example, last week we had to deal with significant cancellations across the rail network in the West Midlands due to the adverse weather conditions. We also had a number of issues around congestion, sometimes around our schools in the morning and afternoon peaks, and in other areas where there are roadworks going on, for example. So what does this mean? What's all this data for? And clearly, you know, there's a whole range of data, which could almost be another presentation in itself, to share with you all the different data sources that we have coming in. Well, the real main purpose of managing our demand is to really revolutionise how we engage with citizens and work for them and enable those journeys. And that's not about managing one mode of transport or another. It's about really thinking in the mind of the customer how we need to help them get around. And that might be affected by incidents. It might be affected by performance on the day of one or other mode. It might be affected by longer term roadworks. But ultimately, we have to really put ourselves into the mind of the customer, I feel, and help them with those intermodal journeys. And one of the ways we can do this is through our communications and engagement, to nudge behaviour change, to help people think about their different options, whether they might be to retime their journey or one on other days, to remode in some cases, to rethink and reroute some of their journeys. So, for example, take a different rail line on one day due to an incident, or take a different road journey. Or also to remove journeys altogether. And that has obviously been a choice of many people, whether ultimately their personal choice or not. It has been a travel choice during the COVID-19 pandemic. So I mentioned communications and engagement, and this is truly a collaboration between all our partners. And through the Regional Transport Coordination Centre, we really put a heavy focus on one version of the truth out for network customers, whether they be travelling by road, by tram, or by rail, or you know, in any other case, trying to get that single view of the network and that one version of the truth for all our customers. So I'm going to give you just a worked example of that, and it's one that may be fresh in the minds of many of you with your own children or students going off to their places of study. So looking at the school and education sites reopening, this is a piece of work that we've really focused on as a reaction to the call from government for us to help those scholars get into their education sites safely and on time. So in August, we used all our data sets available and identified 150 priority schools and colleges that would most likely need support during the reopening in September and early October. And we've involved up to 30 Transport for West Midlands teams, in fact, and 7 local authorities. And people like the West Midlands Rail Executive have been heavily involved, as well as bus operators like National Express. Now, we've done a lot of kind of volume circulation, producing toolkits and sending those out to businesses and schools. But we've also had, using a government grant, 5 grant-funded travel planners embedded in local authorities in the West Midlands area, and there are 7 of those. And they made direct approaches to 145 education establishments to help them keep moving, get their scholars in on time and safely. And we found that at least 31 schools were facing problems, and 28 of those have actively engaged in finding solutions. This is just a screenshot of our dashboard and app to really try to find those operational solutions for some of these educational establishments. What you can see here are hexagons, which are combining data on where there are large numbers of employees in the same area of large numbers of school or other college pupils, and where bus boarding rates are high and rising. And so you can see how we're starting to prioritise our watch spots. And there you can see the overlay of different modal networks as well. And here you can see the 4 p.m. watch spots in September, starting to refresh our data sets and hone in where there are problems, whether they be at bus depots or bus interchanges or bus stations, or in city centres. And Birmingham city centre remains one of our highest watch spots due to that conflagration of all those people coming into the city centre and making those education trips. And here's some examples of operational interventions that we can make during demand management interventions. So, for example, through our daily briefings during this period, over 9 school days, we saw multiple issues raised and dealt with as quickly as possible. One of our rail operators faced driver capacity issues, and through liaison with the West Midlands Rail Executive, they made sure that any resulting train cancellations didn't happen around school opening and closing times. And bus operators have provided duplicate services and responsive sweeper services to cater for additional demand. And that demand is happening due to the social distancing required on our transport. Operational solutions are quickly found for overcrowding at bus stations and interchanges. And you can see here a queuing system that was very rapidly introduced at the Stour Bridge interchange when large numbers of school pupils were queuing, perhaps rather crowding in the interchange, and we needed to introduce a queuing system. So you can see managing demand takes us through some of those operational challenges, whether it's the short-term solutions that we need during a specific incident, like the returning schools and colleges during those education sites reopening, through to longer-term changes in journeys around sometimes longer-term incidents or roadworks on the network, through to even longer-term travel choices around travelling intermodally on our networks. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Deborah. Greatly appreciate it. Yes, intermodality seems to be a theme of today, which is very good news indeed. It's something that maybe we haven't been brilliant at in the past, but I'm sure we're going to be much better in the future, and your work will contribute enormously. It leads us very logically on to our next speaker, who is Andreas Markidis, past president of the Chartered Institute of Highways and Transport. And he has been studying in considerable depth transport interchanges and transport hubs, both in the UK and elsewhere in Europe, and has drawn some conclusions. I will say no more, but he'll talk about it now. So, Andreas, could I hand over to you at this point, please?
Lovely. Thank you, Brian. If I could have my slides up, please. Here we go.
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. And good morning, everybody. Thanks, Brian, and well done for an excellent conference. I know you've had many difficulties putting this together, and you've held it all together. It's absolutely brilliant. Well done. This presentation really was put together with my colleague, Peter Thompson, who is helping me today, as a result of some puzzlement that we both had. We were discussing about transport interchanges in the office one day, and we said, what is stopping us from achieving better connectivity, particularly at railway stations? So it so happened that soon after that, puzzlement and debate in the office, I visited Utrecht station. Next, Peter. And this was about nearly 2 years ago now. And I was quite impressed by Utrecht station. And there's many statistics about it. You know, I'm not going to go into how many platforms it's got, etc. I will focus more on its key features about connectivity. Next. So you've all heard the story about Utrecht. This is the cycle park next to the station itself. It houses 13,000 bicycles, and I happened to stay in the hotel next to the station during my stay there. And I will never forget. I will never forget the. You know, I was having my breakfast in the hotel's breakfast room, and there was this stream of traffic of cyclists going past my window and parking at this fantastic facility, all automated and really, really very impressive. Next. And of course, with it's not just about cycling, it's also about buses, and this is a very impressive bus interchange below and next to the station itself. Next. But really what caught my eye was that concourse itself, the spacious nature of the concourse. It does have some retail outlets, but they are sparingly located. You know, you don't feel oppressed by one coffee shop or you know, any other facilities that we see in many of our stations. You almost feel that this is a place where you want to linger, you want to spend some time, and that was done intentionally. It was designed to be a place rather than a commercial venue. Next. But the most striking feature of the station, it's the pedestrian footbridge that was built to connect one side of the station with the other. The picture on the left shows the station, shows the footbridge they built on its own. It now, of course, sits next to the station concourse itself, and it's a very, very impressive integration of the whole structure. Why did they do that? Next. Next. They did that because, no, let's go back, Peter. Yeah.
Sorry.
Because they wanted to integrate the town center, which was on the east side of the station, with the backlands that were on the west side of the station. And I was told that this area in the past had been used for drug addiction and prostitution, and the Dutch wanted to change that. So they thought, we'll make it part of the town center, which is why they built, this is the back of, you're looking at the rear of the station now, which runs all the way via that footbridge above the railway tracks into the town center itself. And this area has been revitalized as a result of that. Next. And as an icing on the cake, if you like, very recently, the Dutch decided to turn the ring road, which is the middle picture on the left, which had been stifling the town center. In the past, it had been a canal, and in the 1960s, they turned it into a dual carriageway, like many cities in the UK. And more recently, they decided, we've had enough of this, we've had enough of traffic, we're going to turn it back into a canal. And this canal goes all the way into the shopping center that's at the front of the station itself. It's absolutely a remarkable achievement and the complete integration of the town center, really, which completes its connectivity via water. Next. So that brought me back to the question and the debate that I was having in the office with Peter. If the Dutch can do it, why not us as well? And we went on to answer that. Yes, next. And we said to ourselves, of course we can. You know, we've got a number of examples where we've done quite well, really. And St. Pancras Station, for example, is something to be admired. And it has won many awards in Europe, etc. And there's also other examples. Next. This one shows the master plan at St. Pancras, which really illustrates that station connectivity is not only about connecting to trains and bicycle parks, it's also about connecting to the surrounding area. So if you have the correct master plan that takes on board connectivity to everything that surrounds the station, then you can end up with something remarkable like we've achieved at St. Pancras. As well as, you know, Birmingham. Birmingham is a fantastic example of a very well done piece of work. The master planning and the connection of the station to the rest of the city center is very impressive. We've got a few other examples like London Bridge, for example, but we don't have enough. And this, I don't mean to be particularly critical of Cambridge Station, but Cambridge is the seat of learning. You know, it's a fantastic place for culture and academia, and yet the recent development at Cambridge Station left something to be desired in my own view. I wasn't involved with the intricacies of it, and I'm pretty sure there were reasons for the way it has been done, but really to come out of Cambridge Station and to be confronted by a sea of taxis rather than a better connectivity to the city itself, I think is an opportunity missed, and it brings me back to my question: why can we not get it right? And Peter and I went on to identify Peter, to identify a number of reasons why we may not get it right. And this is all these reasons are listed here. They vary from lack of adequate funding to multiple interests. And I'm going to go and take you through these reasons now. Next. All the time, of course, we like to say that we cannot do the best because we haven't got enough funds. And yet, nearly $1 billion was spent at Reading Station recently to give us a fantastic engineering achievement. Reading Station was a throttle to train services from the west, and that throttle has now been broken up and 5 new platforms built. Many more trains go through the station now. A very, very good achievement. Next. However, again, in my own view, this achievement has been achieved and it's all about trains and tracks. Having spent $1 billion on renovating such a big station, in my view, we could have done much better. 2 very simple examples I can give is about the new footbridge that was built to connect the multi-story car park to the station, and compare that to the footbridge built at Utrecht, which was not about connecting the car park itself, it was about connecting 2 parts of the town. Next. And look at the cycle facilities at Reading Station and compare them to those at Utrecht. So not belittling what has been done at Reading Station, I am simply saying that even though we had the money here, nearly £1 billion spent on renovating a station, we didn't quite get the connectivity right. Next. And our question remains, why? Why did we not achieve that? And it must be because we have a set of different priorities. Next. There is a second reason why we cannot achieve the best all the times, and this is down to land ownerships, of course. As a transport planner, I have dealt with many proposals to build a new development on one side of a railway station. And there was always the question about, can we build a footbridge, for example, above the railway tracks to connect to the town center? And then that brought the question of shared value. Network Rail have got an obligation to achieve maximum benefit for the taxpayer. So they asked for their own benefits that might come from the development. The developer, of course, doesn't want to lose any of their benefits that would come from the development because they have already paid for the land. So that usually produced a stalemate, or if that stalemate was broken, it would have been at the cost of something else, like, for example, less affordable housing. So land ownership always is a problem and prevents us from achieving the ideal. Next. And of course, that brings us all to the different interests that exist. And each one of those parties shown on this slide will always seek to maximize their own benefits. That's their right. That's what they're there for. All I'm saying is that if they were to look at producing together a quality project, then they would all benefit from it. But they don't look at that. They look at their own specific interests. Next. And my point is that quality produces better values. It produces better financial rewards. And by bringing all those parties together, we could produce a quality product that would give them the financial rewards that they all seek. Next. And this is a quote that I live by. Businesses are attracted to a place where people want to live, and it's all about the quality of the environment that we could build at a railway station, as well as anywhere else, of course. Next. The fourth reason that we identified is that there isn't really enough guidance about building or rebuilding railway stations in order to achieve connectivity. TfL, as you would expect, were pioneers in this, and they came up with a best practice guide, which is very good, in 2009. My view is that we probably need to update this now and to make it much more of a national guide, and to change some of its emphasis so that there is much more emphasis on placemaking. That would help practitioners when they consider these opportunities to apply these guidelines and knowledge so that we can have better outcomes. I should comment a little bit on the application here as well, because even with guidelines such as this, very few people would refer to them. And that is because of the point I made earlier about different priorities. And we don't have that absolute focus on connectivity and placemaking that is required. So even with guidance, we might pay lip service to it, but not really engage with it. Next. And then everybody talks about the various procedures and processes that we have to go through. They're a big stumbling block. And really what's lacking here is a very strong policy to drive everybody's actions. Even the NPPF doesn't give that much focus on transport interchanges. we keep talking all the time about highway proposals, for example, and you know, we've got the RIS 1 and RIS 2, which is the funding allocation for different highway schemes. There's very little emphasis or driven policy from either high above the government or from lower below the local authority itself towards achieving better interchanges. Next. So what do we need to do? In my view, we need to have master plans for a lot of these interchanges, a lot of these stations, but the master plan itself will not be enough. You know, it can be a pretty picture on some book, but without a strong local authority to drive this through, even the master plan will not achieve that. Next. And this brings me really to the role of government in public affairs. We need a stronger local authority that will regulate things, that will facilitate things, and that will stimulate things. I understand here that in Utrecht, they had the same kind of problems that we face with any redevelopment of station here in the UK. But there, the local authority stood firm. You know, it knew what it wanted, and it wasn't going to let go. And it took them a long time, but in the end, it was the city council that brought all the parties together, found the money available, found the money necessary, and saw the project through. So we do need stronger authorities. In addition to that, Peter and I were asking us as well, you know, a lot of our local authorities now are decimated for one reason or another, lack of funding, etc., not enough manpower. Is this all that's needed really to help us achieve what we all want? Next. Well, you don't need me to tell you, no, that's not all we need. First and foremost, we need leadership. We need somebody to say, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to lead everybody towards that goal. And leadership, of course, takes many different forms. I chose this example here of the Danish. These are all the ministers arriving at the palace to inaugurate the new government, and they are leading by example. They are telling people, I'm going to get on my bike and go to see the Queen. There's other forms of leadership, of course. Next. And I saw that leadership in another Dutch town when I visited 4 or 5 years ago, and that was Eindhoven. Eindhoven, some of you may know, used to be known as Philips Town, because that's where Philips had its headquarters. But in the late 80s, Philips collapsed economically. But the mayor of Eindhoven did not accept defeat. He brought the different parties together. That was a private sector, the local university, and his own department, and they formed what they called treble helix, and that helix developed a strategy for regenerating the whole city after the collapse of Philips. With they wanted to make Eindhoven the San Francisco of Europe by utilizing all the knowledge that Philips had generated in technology. And if you go to see what they've done now in that town, you will be amazed. That was as a result of a mayor that was not afraid of challenges, and he led by example and brought the different parties together with a firm hand to get what he believed in, his vision. Next. And I couldn't help but remind you of the myth of Sisyphus in this respect. Sisyphus was an unfortunate chap who started to misbehave. So the gods of Olympus punished him to be pushing a boulder up a hill all the time, only for the boulder to roll back down again, and then he would start doing that again, and then all over the same labor for the rest of his life. And that really symbolizes, in my view, the futility of our actions without leadership. We do need the leadership to help us achieve better cities, better transport interchanges, better railway stations. Next. And of course, one may wonder, we are all talking about the 15-minute neighborhood now. One of the prime objectives of the mayor of Paris, Anne Hidalgo, recently. The 15-minute neighborhood has been with us, of course, before it became a political catchphrase in France. But I do wonder if with this, the 15-minute neighborhood isn't really the moment for railway stations to find themselves at the center of a neighborhood, at the center of communities, and to help us achieve that connectivity that I'm talking about. My apologies about this. Okay, next. And I'm going to finish by going back to Utrecht. Why was Utrecht successful? It was successful because it was not just a railway project. It was much more than that. It was about connecting to the town, and it was about turning the station into a place, rather than being just a technical solution for transport. So you might say to me, so Andreas and Peter, is this all about connectivity to the rest of the town? And the answer lies with my last slide. Next. Despite everything that I've said, it's not really about connectivity after all. It's about health. And this became a reality to me when, at the end of my visit to Utrecht, I asked the planning director, if I were to ask you, I said to him, to give me one word that symbolizes your key objectives for the city of Utrecht, what would it be? And if I had asked the same question of any planning director of any local authority in the UK, I'm sure they would have said housing delivery, or economic regeneration, or elimination of traffic congestion, or things like that. And he said, my key objective is the health of our citizens. That's where we start from, and that's the linchpin of every other policy that we have for our town. Whether we are talking about transport, the environment, planning, or economics, we always ask ourselves, will it achieve healthier citizens? And we plan according to that key requirement. And that's the end of our presentation. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Andreas. Certainly, that last point is something that you're quite right, isn't normally considered as being top of the list, but it most definitely has an impact on every single one of us in an individual way.
Yeah.
It really is the key importance to our personal lives.
Yes, it was certainly a startling answer as far as I was concerned. Yeah.
Right, we're running slightly behind schedule now, so what will happen is that the breakout rooms will still take place and still be 15 minutes, but we'll have a slightly shorter group discussion afterwards. However, we're now about to have a brief presentation from Camilla Ween, and so started screen sharing. Over to you, Camilla.
Great. Andreas, thank you for that. Gosh, that was really fabulous. And as It's interesting, as I was listening to it and I was thinking, it's all about people, it's all about people. And that's exactly what you said at the end. It's really inspiring. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So I'm just going to give a blitz through some of the aspects of connected cities. In case some of you weren't here this morning, I'll sort of recap very quickly. Next slide, please. So the sort of main principle of the connected cities is to think of it as a cluster of towns that are connected together by 15-minute railway journeys, but each cluster, each pedshed is a circle sort of about 1 kilometer centered on a railway station, so that that railway station is always a 15-minute, no more than a 15-minute walk from wherever you might be within that new zone or an existing zone that's been sort of modified to fit in. So next, please. Oh, and the one point I think that's important to make, which should stay on this slide, is that the sort of connected cities principle is a voluntary confederation of sort of town settlements that cluster together to share sort of amenities, to not necessarily duplicate everything, and to create a really efficient sort of network of things that you can access if you live in any one of these particular pedsheds that all have slightly different characters depending on where they are and the nature of what is around them. But it's very much a cluster. So that is the key thing to sort of understand about the connected cities. Next. And it's very much about sort of livable cities. So it is about creating walking and cycling infrastructure and placemaking that's absolutely core to the design of these new pedsheds, so that really walking and cycling is the absolute first choice. It's convenient, it's comfortable, it's what you naturally would do. You would not think of jumping into your car if you do happen to have one. You think of when you want to go somewhere to meet friends or just to take a walk or to get to the local amenities, you would do it by walking or cycling. Next, please. Oh, that's a new slide. I haven't seen this one. But this is responding very much to the character and to the heritage, so that when you're creating these pedsheds, you're also, apart from looking at all the convenience aspects and connecting up the transport, you're also thinking about what actually exists there. So you might have a watershed, a river, you might have sort of areas of special outstanding natural beauty or whatever, and you work with them, you accept them as constraints, you work with it and you respond to it. So every pedshed is a contextual design based on what's already there. Next, please. Gosh, these are all very different slides, it's fine. Key principle is that the green penetrates right into the center of the pedshed, so that wherever you are within that sort of pedshed, you have very easy access to green, which then sort of takes you out into the wider green beyond, so that it's very much a sort of garden city principle, healthy living and access to free, open, nice space where people can walk, children can play, and so on. Next, please. And so this principle shows, for example, the red line, the arc sort of being the railway, but that you have the sort of medium circle, if you like, with the little red half moons on, is sort of the distributor road. It's typically the high street. It's where the local amenities would be. It's where your shops, your pubs would be. And it's all sort of arranged obviously around the public transport. So the public transport would also be circulating on that distributor road. Next, please. So we've got sort of, I'm not quite sure what I'm supposed to say here, actually. This is the new one to me. But Brian, do you want to hop in, or shall I just skip this one?
What's actually happened is that what we're showing here is the presentation that's due for the planning slot, not the transport slot. Hence the confusion. So apologies to everybody for that. But broadly speaking, to follow this on, in planning terms, there are three different kinds of growth areas, really. There's either what you have on the left, which is called a town growth zone, which is focused very much on the existing station of the existing town, and it's about how that develops. In the middle, you have what's called a new green quarter, which is effectively a garden suburb, and it's built around a new railway station, which is at the point where the railway leaves the existing town. And so it effectively makes the town smaller in public transport terms because, of course, you get a better connection. And then thirdly, on the right-hand side, we have a new green town, which is an entire garden city, which is an entirely new settlement, again, only 1 kilometre in radius, but which is built around a new station in the land between existing towns. So next slide, please. And then this is the final slide here. And just to give you some idea of the kind of densities that occur inside these ped sheds. Each ped shed is about 300 hectares. It has a population of around 30,000 people. That gives it a density of 100 persons per hectare, which is what the UN specify is the minimum level for viable public transport. It contains about 10,000 dwellings. But the good news is that 50% of the land can be given over to green space of varying different kinds at these sorts of densities. So it's very much an open green kind of environment. As I say, this is not the presentation we were going to have at this point, but not to worry, the principles are all equally applicable. So at this point, what we will do is we will move to the breakout rooms. Now, for those of you who have the latest version of the Zoom software, there's a quick and simple way of doing this. So John, could I ask you to describe that, please?
Okay, everybody, I'm just going to quickly describe the new way of doing this. In the old days, we used to ask you to key into chat. In a moment, you should be able to see a screen like this with any luck. If you can't, don't panic. We'll call out your names and ask you to respond. But basically, we'd like you to choose between a breakout room with Mike Smith, Deborah Fox, or Andreas Markades. Okay, I'm going to click a button. Your screens may change, and we'll see what happens. Okay, so if you're still with me, it means you haven't got the option to choose for yourself. So what I'd like you to do, I'm going to call out your names, roughly alphabetical order. It may be not quite alphabetical order, and just give me the name or the room number that you'd like to go to. Okay, so we'll get through this as quickly as we can. Philip Smart. You might need to unmute. Okay, don't worry. Robert's iPhone. John Liddell. Bryony Chetwody. Sorry, Bryony, can you hear me? No? Okay. Sirhan.
Sorry, what were the options again?
Well, Mike Smith, the chap from Network Rail, Deborah Fox from the West Midlands, and Andreas, who talked about Utrecht and things like that.
Could you put me to Andreas, please?
Okay. Peter Lovering.
Andreas, please.
Lucy Travis.
Andreas, please.
Peter Wakefield.
Network Rail, please.
Mike Smith. Yeah. Glyn Thomas.
Andreas, please.
Nick. We've only got a first name for Nick. Okay, moving on. Chris Church.
Network Rail.
Daniel Bone.
Andreas.
Olivier Andre.
Andreas, please.
Jenny Raggett.
Andreas, please.
Nikki Barton. Okay, didn't hear you, Nikki. You might need to unmute. Okay, Philip Bilo.
Andreas, please.
Anthony Joyce. Camilla.
Yeah, stick me in number 2 with Deborah, please.
Okay. Anthony Joyce. Sarah Chapman.
Andreas, please.
David Redgewell.
Network Rail, please.
Jian Lee.
Mike Smith, please.
Christina.
Deborah, please.
Alex Hurd.
Deborah, please.
Andrew Pritchard. Okay, not heard. So Robert
Mike Smith.
So that's Andrew, is it?
Yes.
Okay. Right, we'll start again at the top. Robert's iPhone. No. Okay. John Liddell. Bryony Chetwoody. Nick. Anthony Joyce. Nikki Barton, I think that is. Okay. Not to worry, I'm just going to allocate you as we go.
Hello, John, are you in this room?
I am, Richard, yes.
And you can hear me?
I can, yes. We're
All
just
right,
about to finish the breakout rooms.
Yeah, they couldn't hear me in the breakout room just now for some reason. So, okay, that's as long as that's working then.
Excuse me a moment, I'm just going to have to concentrate on something else.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, welcome back everybody. Are you with us, Brian?
Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm muted. I apologise. Yes, well, I'm sure that they were very good breakout sessions. And all we have time for at this point is a brief feedback from each of the speakers, if you would give it just a minute of what were the key themes that you spoke about in your session, please. So could I first ask Mike?
Okay, can everybody hear me?
Yep.
I think we have 4 main points. First point being that we do need to think in the future about how we allocate capacity. It may not be in the same way as it's been in the past, and COVID and changes in working and leisure patterns are going to drive that. That there is still a challenge at multiple agencies involved in any given issue, and we're trying to bring the industry together, but that means bringing the transport community together closer and making that transport community more open to its constituents members, be that the public or any other sort of interests. And the last point was that Network Rail is going, and the railway in general is going through a process of devolution to create stronger regional identity, which means that we can be closer to not just the train operating companies and the local politicians, but closer to the public, such that the passengers and the freight users are, absolutely the forefront of our decision making.
Great, thank you very much, Mike. Very good synopsis there. Deborah, could I ask you, please, to...
Yeah, absolutely. We had some fantastic questions, and I think the main principle was that we have to have multimodal interchange, and we have to have not only good design of that interchange, but also its seamless timing of services to give people confidence and put people equally at ease, whatever mode of transport they're using to navigate around that interchange. Thinking of the journey from A to B and everything in between, and not just defaulting to thinking about one part of that on one mode or other. And for interchange not to be cumbersome. And so whether that be through smart ticketing, through journey planning, through the convenience of the infrastructure itself. And I've made an invitation to everybody to have a look at some of the new stations that are coming to the West Midlands, with opening their doors for new passengers from December 2021, and really to have a look at some of that strong local and regional leadership that is making this happen.
Tremendous. Oh, well, that sounds very good. Right, let me think. Andreas, you'll be next. Yeah.
Thank you, Brian. 3 points from me. First one, greater emphasis on connectivity in designing transport interchanges, and that emphasis should come from architects and engineers alike. Empowerment of local authorities, and thirdly, that goes with the second point, is leadership. Really, we need stronger leaders and a vision in order to achieve better outcomes.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah, I'm not. Yes, strong leadership. I mean, there's leadership and leadership. Whatever it is, it's got to be somehow both democratic and strong leadership, and that's the great challenge.
Yeah,
it
of
really
course.
is. And I'm sure it's achievable. As human beings are not.
In the breakout session, we spoke about the Dutch way of bringing in the public, the engagement, etc. And we could do better ourselves in that respect.
Tremendous. Okay, and finally, Camilla, did you have a breakout room of your own? No, I don't think she did.
No, I was actually in with Deborah.
Right, okay, that makes sense. I thought that was the case. Fine. Well, we have absolutely hit 1 o'clock on the nail, so I'm afraid there won't be a common discussion at this point. That we will have a break between now and 2 o'clock, so everybody can have lunch and so forth. Please join us then. As ever, join us 10 minutes, 15 minutes beforehand, please, so we can sort things out. For those of you who haven't had the opportunity to update your Zoom to the latest version, there will be a brief tutorial after this in which John will run you through the process, because it does make it simpler and easier. And so that. But I now take the opportunity to thank all of our speakers. Really tremendously influential stuff. And especially as 2 of them had stepped in at the very last minute. Enormous thanks to you guys. Tremendous work. And look forward to seeing everybody else again at 2 o'clock. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Sure.
My recommendation, folks, is that you go away and get some well-deserved lunch. But for those of you that are very keen to update your Zoom, which would give you much more flexibility on how you go to breakout rooms, then I'll do a very quick session now on how to do it. If you're not interested, please click the leave button and go and have some lunch.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks, John. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks a lot. Cheers.
Okay. Those of you that are left, I'm assuming you are interested in this. Please leave if you're not. Feel free to go if you're not. There's 2 aspects to this. One is if you didn't see this option to choose your own breakout rooms, which would make that whole process that we went through half an hour ago much more straightforward. You just choose for yourself. You need to update your version of Zoom in order to be able to do this. So, on a computer, if you're logged into a Zoom account, which you may not be, you may be using a computer without a Zoom account, but if you are, click on the little profile with either your face or your initials at the top right of the screen you get when you first launch Zoom. You won't be able to see it now, I'm afraid. If you try and do this now, it won't let you because we're in a meeting. But when the meeting closes, you'll be able to see your little image there. Then you click for updates, and it'll say something like what you can see on the right there. Update available, and it will give you all these enhanced facilities. Pretty obvious, really. Give it a go when you've left the meeting if you have a computer and you're signed into a Zoom account. If you're not signed into a Zoom account on a computer, the best way is to go to the Zoom website and re-download the meetings client. Close down Zoom completely, re-download the meetings client, and then launch it again. And you should be then on version 5.3.1, which will give you everything we've been talking about. If you're on a tablet or a smartphone, an iPad, an iPhone, whatever, an Apple device, go to the App Store. On an Android device, go to the Google Play Store. Look for the purchases, in other words, the apps that you have already bought, even though they're free. Look for the one called Zoom Cloud Meetings, and what you'll probably see is a little update prompt against Zoom Cloud Meetings. Tap Update, and eventually your device should update. Okay, I hope that's helpful. But like I say, you can't actually do this until you've left the meeting. So I'm going to stop the meeting now and wish you all a good lunch. See you just before 2 o'clock.